School of Planning and Architecture Vijayawada is an autonomous institution established by Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. It is a premier centrally funded institution for excellence in the fields of planning and architecture. The quality of education imparted and its focus on research puts SPAV in the league of leading institutes in the country. The school has distinguished itself and has grown as a role model in the professional education, offering undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral programs in the fields of planning and architecture, while at the same time fostering quality research in these domains. All efforts are being made to develop the school as a place of excellence for innovation, creativity, and research through architecture and planning domains. SPA Vijayawada is ranked one of the best technical institutes in the country by National Survey and Ranking, India Today Group, as well as it holds a 9th position in NIRF ranking nationwide for architecture. SPA Vijayawada is at the heart of Vijayawada city and is approximately 10 acres. And it hosts a set of iconic buildings with award-winning designs that evolved in an environment-friendly campus master plan. SPA Vijayawada Student Housing Design was awarded the prestigious International Inauguration Prize for 2018 in the category of Low and Mid-Rise Housing in Architecture. Also, the overall campus design received the Griha Exemplary Performance Award for 2018 under the category of Passive Architecture Design. The form and structure of the academic and administrative block is deemed to be outstanding in the city of Vijayawada and is infused with local materials in contemporary brutalist and minimalist design. The buildings in the campus capture maximum natural lighting and ventilation through multi-level courtyards and light bells. It has several unique architectural and structural features of innovation. The campus has ICT-enabled teaching atmosphere, high-end digital surveillance system, modern laboratories, spacious studios and classrooms, open-air theaters, auditorium, cafeteria, and outdoor sports facilities. In addition, there are several well-equipped seminar rooms, smart lecture rooms, discussion rooms, boardrooms, and exhibition hall. The campus has an additional 2.6 acres land with green cover, which is in the process of being developed as an outdoor sport facility. All common areas are connected by Wi-Fi and 1 GB per second internet connectivity. The computer labs have state-of-the-art workstation and network which can handle high-end computing required for design, rendering, and processing of satellite data for planning. The Central Library of SPAV is one of the ingenious and most resourceful and connected technical libraries in the southern region of India, supporting teaching, learning, research, and consultancy activities in the domains of planning and architecture. SPA Vijayawada believes in a paradigm of education that combines intrinsic and instrumental values of the discipline. The students are not merely imparted or prescribed what to learn, but are also encouraged to discover and innovate. SPA Vijayawada has built instrumental environment of education, standing on pillars of adequate infrastructure, tools of experimentation, and presence of wisdom. Life and engagement at the campus makes a student a responsible individual towards its environment. With the perfect location of the campus at the heart of the city, the campus boasts of proximity to major residential areas, shopping malls, and supermarkets, as well as close proximity to premium hospital and hospitality services within a range of 1 kilometer itself. The students' health is enriched by the exquisite flora and fauna now thriving within the campus, added by the development of sports facilities which the students enjoy. The students also participate in myriad extracurricular activities, celebration of fests and festivals, and thus enhancing a cosmopolitan culture befitting and cherishing the National Institute that receives a throng of students every year from across the country. Thank you for watching the video. For more information, visit our website. School of Planning and Architecture Vijayawada is an autonomous institution established by Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. It is a premier centrally funded institution for excellence in the fields of planning and architecture. The quality of education imparted and its focus on research puts SPAV in the league of leading institutes in the country. The school has distinguished itself and has grown as a role model in the professional education, offering undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral programs in the fields of planning and architecture, while at the same time fostering quality research in these domains. All efforts are being made to develop the school as a place of excellence for innovation, creativity, and research through architecture and planning domains. SPA Vijayawada is ranked one of the best technical institutes in the country by National Survey and Ranking, India Today Group, as well as it holds a 9th position in NIR of ranking nationwide for architecture. SPA Vijayawada is at the heart of Vijayawada city and is approximately 10 acres. And it hosts a set of iconic buildings with award-winning designs that evolved in an environment-friendly campus master plan. SPA Vijayawada Student Housing Design was awarded the prestigious International Duration Prize for 2018 in the category of Low and Mid-Rise Housing in Architecture. Also, the overall campus design received the Griha Exemplary Performance Award for 2018 under the category of Passive Architecture Design. The form and structure of the academic and administrative block is deemed to be outstanding in the city of Vijayawada and is infused with local materials in contemporary brutalist and minimalist design. The buildings in the campus capture maximum natural lighting and ventilation through multi-level courtiers and light wells. It has several unique architectural and structural features of innovation. The campus has ICT-enabled teaching atmosphere, high-end digital surveillance system, modern laboratories, spacious studios and classrooms, open-air theaters, auditorium, cafeteria, and outdoor sports facilities. In addition, there are several well-equipped seminar rooms, smart lecture rooms, discussion rooms, boardrooms, and exhibition hall. The campus has an additional 2.6 acres land with green cover, which is in the process of being developed as an outdoor sport facility. All common areas are connected by Wi-Fi and 1 GB per second internet connectivity. The computer labs have
So, good morning to all of you. I would request the dignitaries to please come on the dais so that we can start the proceedings, the inauguration. Yeah, please. Video was running on. A very good morning to one and all. I welcome you all to the inaugural session of the International Conference on Resilient and Livable City Planning, RLCP 2020. The seeds of this conference were sowed about 14 months back, way back I would say, in December 2019 approximately. At that time we had a vision to conduct it in October 2020. However, as we all know, the world changed a lot from March 2020, confining us into lockdowns, but also uniting us virtually in varied dimensions. But after crossing all these hurdles with smiles, it is time now to inaugurate this 4-day international conference. And for that, I would invite the Director, SPA Vijayawada, Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, the patron of RLCP, Dr. Adi Narayan, the convener of RLCP 2020, and the Dean Planning and Development. The head of the Department of Planning, Dr. Abdul Razak Muhammad, the Secretary of the Organizing Committee of RLCP, Dr. Amitava, the Secretary of Finance Committee of RLCP and Dean Students Affairs, and Dr. Janmejay, Head of the Department of Architecture, to kindly come forward to light the inaugural lamp. Thank you, Director Ma'am, and the dignitaries on the dais. I would request now that the invocation song sung by our own students be kindly played.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रामृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्कर प्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाढ्यापहा शुक्लां ब्रह्म विचार सार परमा आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनी वीणां पुस्तकधारिणीमभयदां जाढ्यान्धकारापहा हस्तै स्फाटिकमालिका विधतती पद्मासने संस्थिता वन्दे तां परमेश्वरीं भगवतीं बुद्धिप्रदां शारदाम् बुद्धिप्रदां शारदाम्.
You may be kindly seated. Thank you, students, for the warm invocation. I now request Dr. Adi Narayan, convener of the conference and Dean Planning and Development, to kindly deliver the welcome address of the International Conference on Resilient and Livable Cities Planning.
Thank you. Very good morning, distinguished guests, respected colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It is the time to successfully wrap up a year's work for this conference RLCP 2020. Considering just how busy you all must be, thank you very much for taking your precious time to participate in the SPA Vijayawada's International Conference on Resilient and Livable City Planning. In particular, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Architect Brinda Somia, Chief Pattern RLCP 2020 and Chairperson BOG, and Pattern Chairperson RLCP 2020 and our Director SPA Vijayawada, Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, for the continuous support and guidance. Without our Director unconditional support, it would not have happened to achieve this stage. Thank you, Madam. Also, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to other distinguished guests from India and abroad. Please allow me to express my sincere appreciation for Architect Dean Gabriel D. Cruz, Principal Architect, Dean D. Cruz Associates Goa, Chief Guest of this conference, Architect Khan Abib Agamat, President, Council of Architecture, Guest of Honor for this conference, and other eminent keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Piyush Tiwari, Professor, Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning, University of Melbourne, Australia, Dr. Marcus, Professor, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway, Dr. Louis Rice, Professor, University of West England, Bristol, UK, Dr. P.S.N. Rao, Professor and Director, School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, Dr. Herrick, Professor, University of Lille, France. Thank you all for your valuable time and dedication towards this RLCP 2020. I am pleased to welcome you all and hope that this conference will serve as a catalyst for strengthening national and international cooperation on the transfer of rich knowledge, innovative approach, and as well as technology. In addition, I am most thankful for the constant efforts of faculty members and staff members of SPA Vijayawada towards the promotion of this RLCP 2020. It is high time that such an event is organized to highlight the remarkable contribution on resilience and livable approach and applications for transforming urban systems. A glance through the list of presentation and rich keynotes planned for the next few days reveals the amazing diversity of this application in city planning. We are happy to inform that we received 270 abstracts, out of which 178 full-length papers were received for RLCP 2020. Thereafter, with careful blind review by national and international expert, which is external to SPA Vijayawada at different stages, we have finally shortlisted 96 full-length papers for this conference. About 50 high-quality papers out of this will be selected by Emerald Web of Science Journal and as well as Springer Asti book series for subsequent journal publications. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a great demand for planning and architecture services in contemporary world. Developing countries are simply passive recipients of technologies created and shared by their developed partners. On the contrary, many developing countries have acquired high levels of expertise in achieving resilience and livable built environment through innovative science and technology. They use this expertise to innovate for their own benefit, but also share it with the other developing countries. Many of these city planners, architects, engineers, and policymakers went on to play a key role in building capacity in resilience and livable city planning in their countries. I expect that some of them are with us today. The conference proceedings, Resilient and Livable City Planning, presents insights from a team of expert cross-sector contributors from Urban Sustainability Network, including architects, urban planners, policymakers, and as well as researchers. The proceedings expand on key themes discussed and topics in report include how good governance, disaster preparedness, planning cities for people, and building resilient infrastructure all contribute to livable and resilient cities. Under the key themes of this RLCP conference, planning studies, city planning and design, ecology and society, urban energy and resilience, sustainable urban system, and livable city. They range from authors propose practical steps that municipal leaders, businesses, and even citizens can take to help make their cities more resilient to disaster and the impacts of climate change. At the same time, to create places that are more attractive to live, work, and to play. Recommendations ranging from the immediately practical, for example, creating a communication plan pre-disasters, to more complex undertakings such as forming an overall urban vision for the city. The authors make clear a key component to addressing resilience in cities in flexibility. The ability to adapt to sudden changes and incorporate new information quickly will be a hallmark of success for those cities facing increasingly unpredictable impact of climate change. Taking steps toward making cities more livable is also key to achieving long-term sustainability and economic competitiveness in rapidly growing urban and as well as metropolitan regions. Efficient, reliable public transportation, green public spaces, and clean air, water are essential components that make a city livable, pleasant, and people-oriented. These proceedings trigger the Livable Cities Design Challenge and planning competition aimed at achieving cities more livable and resilient. Ladies and gentlemen, conferences such as this provide valuable opportunity for city planners, architects, engineers, policymakers, research scientists, industry specialists, and decision makers to share experience. This is the high time to acknowledge the unconditional support from our faculty side, Professor Dr. Abdul Razak, Dr. Ayon, and Dr. Fayaz Ahmed throughout the all stages of this preparatory work for this conference. Thank you all. I am grateful to the many experts who have come to share their knowledge this week. I am sure you will have fruitful and rewarding changes in the next few days. I wish you every success with this important conference and look forward to learning about the outcome. Last but not the least, I strongly hope that all of the distinguished guests gathered here today for this conference on-site and as well as online will offer your generous support and encouragement for the successful launching and continued growth of School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. Once again, I am most grateful for your participation and support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinarayan, for summarizing the purpose and the efforts behind the conference so well. I now have the privilege to invite Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, the Director of SPA Vijayawada and the Chief Patron of this conference, who has been a firm resolve and an astute positive force of motivation behind envisioning this conference, as well as guiding it throughout these 14 months. Before that, very briefly, I would like to introduce our director also. Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain is a distinguished architect with specialization in landscape architecture at the PG and PhD level. Before joining SPA Vijayawada as the director, she has served as the HOD architecture in NIT Hamirpur as well as the Dean of NIT Hamirpur. She has several publications in scholarly articles in journals. She has authored several books and several prestigious projects. With this brief introduction, I would invite Director Ma'am to grace the occasion with an inaugural address.
Thank you, Ayon. And my warm greetings to you all on the occasion of the international conference, which is themed as Resilient and Livable City Planning, Transforming Urban Systems. So this conference, we were, as rightly said by Dr. Ayon Tarafdar, was being planned as an offline earlier, and it took 14 months for us for the preparation. And still, unfortunately, we could not call all our participants on this day. And we waited for this day for a long time, for the past 14 months, as I said. And at the outset, I extend my warm greetings to all of you. And I extend a very warm welcome to Architect Dean de Cruz, who is the chief guest for this day. Dr. Dean de Cruz is an architect of eminence. I also extend my warm welcome to our guest of honor, Shri Habib Khan, President Council of Architecture, Convener Dr. Adi Narayanan, Secretary and Joint Secretary of the conference, the various committee members, faculty, staff, students, research scholars, authors of the various research papers and media. Our chief guest of today, Architect Dean de Cruz, is a Goa-based architect and a partner of a award-winning firm, Mosaic, that has been undertaking a wide range of projects of architecture and product designing in and around India. Architect Cruz is also a senior member of the School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. As per his ideology, one needs to be truthful to exhibit the emotive nature of the space one is designing, and such spaces should celebrate visual treat of a hospitality project, the sacred silence of a religious space, and the inspirational nature of the institutional projects. Our guest of honor, Architect Habib Khan, is of a strong belief that architects and planners, by designing and planning the spaces and built forms, can influence social conditions, then they need to be the cause of the positive social change and can contribute immensely in the nation building. Our keynote speaker of today are Professor Piyush Tiwari, Faculty of Architecture, University of Melbourne, and Dr. Marcus Schickwey, who is the Professor of Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway. They have been consistently visiting School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, for the various academic exercises. It is a matter of great honor and satisfaction for me in welcoming you all on the occasion of this mega event on the virtual mode. I acknowledge and applaud the contribution of the Planning Department of School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, for hosting this grand event. The journey of SPA Vijayawada of attaining knowledge and high-end skill is always inclusive and indigenous. Our faculty, infrastructure, students, extracurricular activities, industry institute interaction and research ecosystem are all focused towards inclusive approach. Hence, our products are robust, innovative and adaptive. I'm happy to mention here that our student has grown. Our institute also has grown from a small group of staff and infrastructure facility till early 2018 to a full-fledged integrated campus today. As the lease of the old campus was expiring, we expedited the construction activities and shifted to our permanent campuses in June 2018. The institute witnessed a historic moment by combining the third convocation and inauguration of the campus, both taking place in August 2018. In today's context, SP Vijayawada has become the most sought after city among us, the prospective students and thus researchers. The building itself is an epitome of contemporary architecture with a blend of traditional materials. We have a dedicated academic and administrative block, hostels, faculty block, open-air theatre, outdoor sports area and auditorium is in the making. The institute building was conferred upon Griha Exemplary Performance 2018 Award for the passive architecture design. On the academic front, apart from offering our flagship program of B Architecture and B Planning, we are offering 7 master's degree specialization. In the order of their commencement are environmental planning and management, sustainable architecture, urban and regional planning, landscape architecture, transport and infrastructure planning, architecture conservation, and building engineering and management. SPA secured 9th position under the architecture category in National Institute ranking framework for the years 2019 consistently. I am very pleased and humbled to announce at this platform the students of our planning department. They were declared as the winners Among all the planning institutes across the country, our architecture students were declared as runners-up in zonal NASA and bagged various prizes and awards besides the HUDCO citation in annual NASA. In terms of outreach, SPA Vijayawada has been continuously joining hands with the leading institutes and organizations of the world, and it not only provides exposure to the students towards the best practices in the world, but also to share and learn from each collaboration. Our school has Memorandum of Understanding with University of Melbourne, Australia, University of Lille, France, University of Danube, Austria, University of Florence, Italy, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway. Recently, we have signed a MOU with UN Habitat for research collaboration. We have conducted joint academic exercise with the students of some of these foreign universities. We are in close network with other two SPAs, which are at SPA Delhi and Bhopal, and have collaboration arrangements with the Council of Architecture, Institute of Town Planners, All India Council of Technical Education, ITPI, the National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad, APHRDI, Department of Higher Education, Government of Andhra Pradesh, AP TIDCO, APGBCL, NID, AP, Vijayawada Municipal Corporation, National Research Development Corporation, Andhra Pradesh, and many others. Eminent professionals and practitioners are invited to our campus very frequently to deliver talk and interact with the students. As an educational institute, we constantly challenge ourselves to raise the bar and place ourselves at the highest standards of the academic excellence in architecture planning through innovation, inclusion, acquisition, and dissemination of knowledge using sustainable local and global practices. The 4 days International Conference on Resilient and Livable City Planning is one of the sincerest efforts towards this direction. The purpose of conducting this program is to foresee what kind of urban real are we anticipating in future, and some reflections and way forward on the genealogy of the livable city shall be spelled out. As we are aware, cities as engines of economic growth are known to occupy center stage on the planet Earth. Globally, cities are fast emerging as major centers of education, innovation, medical facility, trade and commerce, art and culture. As determinant of national growth and development, cities have emerged as major contributors to the national wealth and prosperity, occupying as little as 2% of land and accommodating more than half of the global population and generating about 3/4 of global GDP. Cities are known to be the definers of the future growth and development of nations. 21st century is rightly called the century of urbanization, with cities holding 80% of global population by the year 2050. As per the researchers, there are 5 fundamental aspects of great livable cities. Robust and complete robust and complete neighborhoods, and accessibility and sustainable mobility, a diverse and resilient local economy, and vibrant public space and affordability. We see often in our cities, the weekends, happy weekends are being celebrated in the streets, and many cities in India as well, we have the now trying to create the vibrant spaces and the happy streets. Each city is inherently a very unique city by virtue of its geographical location and climatic parameters, which fundamentally have a strong influence on its culture. This further influences people's behavior and festivities in public spaces, and these are very specific to the cities. The genius loci, or the protective spirit of the place, need to be preserved and enhanced. Public spaces, the transport network, and technology need to be aligned to nurture that distinctiveness so that they not only survive but also grow and empower. History, notes of memories, references that have enriched the city over the years should be preserved, and every city is exceptional in its own way and should evolve in such a way which will preserve such uniqueness. On the hindsight of it, rapid urbanization is a critical factor altering the built landscape, affecting negatively the ecology and environment. Rural push to urban pull is a major reason of transformation of region from rural to urban. This trend of migration needs to be checked by creating equal opportunities in the rural areas. As peri-urban areas are under the influence of both urban and rural areas, they are subjected to dispersed growth causing urban sprawls. This has been observed. This is the crux of the various pioneers as well as my own observation, that most Indian cities severely lack public open squares and planned city central parks or green corridors. In the absence of such facility, the main arterial road or the air conditioning buildings become the only public spaces to hang out with the families, there is a need for the creation of compact, walkable, pedestrian-oriented mixed land use, which is centered around high mass transport network system. It has been observed that master plans, layout and planning practices till date do not include the minimizing energy and limiting travel as a focus of planning. Planning still believes in promoting mobility rather than accessibility. We still plan for the vehicles rather than people. We continue to expand the cities by carrying out the development activities in peri-urban areas, green buffers, agriculture land, and the areas allocated for dairy farming, etc. There is a need to revisit the importance of integrated green, open, and blue spaces in city. A holistic approach is essential to plan for the large-scale multifunctional open and green spaces within the cities. Transit-oriented development enables to create vibrant, livable, sustainable communities. Green spaces must form the integral part of working and living. Walking design with pedestrians should be given the highest priority. As climate change affects a natural system, the continuing loss of the biodiversity and degradation of the ecosystem weakens their ability to provide essential services. Working with nature rather than against it brings multiple benefit for preserving our climate and hence biodiversity. By conserving nature and restoring the ecosystems, we reduce vulnerability and increased resilience. Nature conservation and restoration is a major cost-effective supporter in our fighting against the climate change. As per the independent global review on the economics of biodiversity, a fundamental change in how we think about how to approach the economics is needed if we are to reverse the trend of the biodiversity loss and protect and enhance the prosperity today. It is hoped that this conference would arrive at implementable recommendations which will go a long way forward for the realization of the aim of this conference. I highly applaud the strong determination and efforts of the organizers and offer my best wishes for the successful conduction of this program. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Director Ma'am, for your inspiring speech as well as for highlighting some of our achievements in recent past. Before I move on to the next item, I would also like to mention here an important information about our sponsor. We had the opportunity as well as the fortune to have AMDA Delhi, that is the Association of Municipalities and Development Authorities of India, who have graced us by being our sponsor for this event. Big thank you to you and particular appreciation for Mr. Selvadurai, the Director of AMDA in Delhi. Thank you very much. I now have the honor to invite our guest of honor, Architect Habib Khan Ahmed, the President of the Council of Architecture of India and an architect of honorable eminence and following. Architect Habib Khan graduated as an architect with a gold medal from VNIT Nagpur and thereafter did his master's in architectural design from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. In 91, he started his own practice in Nagpur, and very soon, within a few years, he received the award of the Best Interior Design Award as well as the Best Architect by the Indian Institute of Architects. He was also presented with the RLCP Award in 2009 and the State Level Award of Excellence for Architectural Profession and Education by the Indian Institute of Architects, Maharashtra Chapter. He was the founder chairman of IIID Nagpur Regional Chapter, and he has been a continuing education board member and the chairman for the Indian Institute of Architects. I request Sir to kindly address this gathering as a guest of honor.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Dr. Adi Narayan, Architect Dean D. Cruz, dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, distinguished keynote speakers, session speakers, participants, delegates, students, my dear architect friends, ladies and gentlemen. I bring warm greetings from the Council of Architecture. It's a pleasure to be amongst my fraternity and to be amongst the distinguished faculty members and the fraternity at SPA Vijayawada. The theme of the conference, Resilient and Livable Cities, is a very relevant theme in today's context, especially after the pandemic and the lockdowns that the world has seen. We have to think hard as to how our cities should be, how the city of the future should be. We have been absolutely bombarded with issues that we have never faced earlier. We have seen, and it's been a regular phenomena where the migration from the rural areas happened to the urban areas, but this time we also saw the reverse migration from the urban areas back to the rural or semi-urban areas. And we need to think as to how shall we plan and design our city of the future. My two thoughts, there are many issues that I would have discussed today, but I will concentrate only on two issues which I think are very pertinent today. While our cities have increased manifold and we have seen the growth of cities across our country, we are not able to contain the migration into urban areas. While the cities have grown, the quality of life has gone down. The quality of life of our urban citizens have gone down. The cities are struggling with the infrastructure bursting out, and however much economic resources are made available for the development of the city, they fall short because of the ever expanding nature of our cities. And we need to look at this phenomena very pragmatically and try to address the root cause of this main issue that our cities are facing today. The quality of life of our urban citizen, of our fellow citizens, is of primary importance. And while we provide lip service for improving the quality of life by having various developmental activities in the city, somehow our policymakers, our planners, architects are unable to cope up with the ever expanding nature of our cities today. Instead of, I believe, addressing the issues and trying to find solutions to problems, we should address the root cause of this problem, and that is the empowerment of the rural sector, the agro sector, and we need to look at the migration that happens into urban cities, and we need to look at the roadmap wherein we will be able to empower the rural sector so that the migration from these areas do not happen into our cities. We also need to look at the model that we are following for our city development, for our urban development, wherein we need to have a development. We need to have limits and and parameters wherein a city does not grow more than a designated size or designated population. And we have satellite cities, we have other cities, we have new cities, or whatever. Planners are more qualified to think about this and work on this, wherein we are able to contain the development of a city within a certain radius, with certain parameters, so that the quality of life of our fellow citizens would improve. The second issue is that we need to think about the aspect of discussing these issues in various forums, conferences, conclaves, and seminars amongst our own fraternity. We are architects, planners, designers, scientists, and we keep discussing these issues and things in our forums, in our closed door forums. It is a very important aspect to take this, the deliberations and the proceedings of the conference to the society at large, to the policymakers, to the politicians, to the people who matter, and make them aware of the deliberations that happen and what should be the roadmap for the development. It is very important that we architects and our fraternity also get involved in policy making, we get involved in politics, we get involved in bureaucracy, wherein we are able to make a positive change with all the think tank that is there in our fraternity. And we need to take this out and be able to implement the policies, implement the suggestions and the proceedings that we deliberate on in conferences to these people, wherein we are able to make a positive difference. I wish all of you all the best, and I hope there will be meaningful deliberations in the conference. I am very impressed with the lineup of speakers and the papers that are being presented, and I congratulate and appreciate the kind of effort that has been put in by everyone at SPA Vijayawada. And I'm sure I would request Dr. Meenakshi Jain to share the proceedings with the council so that we can take it to every school across the country, and also to take it to people who are in a position to implement the deliberations of the conference. I would request you to share with the council if possible, and we will be doing whatever we can at our end to help this cause, a very important topic and issue to that you are deliberating in the coming days. Once again, all the best, and I'm sure you all will enjoy and will have meaningful deliberations in the days to come in the international conference. And it's a pleasure to be amongst Dean. Hi, Dean, and we've collaborated in so many projects. It's a pleasure to work with you. And thank you, Meenakshi, for inviting me. We have learned architecture together, and it's a pleasure to see you there. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for inviting me.
On behalf of the organizing committee and patron, I thank you, sir, for your. I request you to be with us for a moment more, as we would like to felicitate you for your support and your graceful presence today. And I request our Director, Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, and Convener Dr. Adinarayan to kindly accept this memento on behalf of our guest of honor as a token. And we would be couriering this to you, sir, after this memento. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I now have the honor to invite our chief guest, Architect Dean Gabriel De Cruz, Principal Architect of Dean De Cruz Associates, Goa. A very brief introduction. After graduating from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Bombay in 1983, Architect Dean De Cruz joined as an architect with Gerard de Cunha in Goa. And eventually in 1986, he became a partner of the firm called Natural Architecture, working on cost-effective housing, using waste building materials and innovative design. In 1994, he expanded his base of design work and started designing hotels and large housing projects and institutional projects as the principal architect of Dean De Cruz and Associates. In 2001, he co-founded Mosaic, which is another architectural firm with general collaboration between disciplines as a core ethic, and went on to design some of the most prestigious and large projects in the hospitality and institutional sectors of India and abroad. And having been a part of the state level committee for making of the regional development plan for Goa 2021, he is currently spending a lot of his interest and time on urban interventions, sustainable principles, and conservation. Sir, it is an honor to have you amongst us today. I invite you to kindly address the gathering as the chief guest.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I've had a fairly long association with the SPA Vijayawada, and I'm happy to see your transition from the old campus to the new campus, and happy to hear that you're happy with what you'll have as a base now, and look forward to seeing a lot more successful, producing a lot more successful students from your new campus. So today I'll share with you my own thoughts. I'm not a trained planner, but I've actually got thrust into planning over the last 12 years or so. So I'll share with you my little journey of planning in some way. So can I share screen?
Yes, sir, you can share your screen.
Okay. Yeah, so really, I mean, uh, trained as an architect, we live in a world which is very limited to the size of plot in which we design. Our impact on society is limited to the buildings we design. But 12 years ago, I actually uh, sort of got an opportunity to get on board bigger issues. But this journey of planning actually started much before that. Uh, we were shortlisted to do the Sustainable Building Center for Pune municipality. This was to be a demonstration center for really the principles of basic sustainability. And it was so that other pieces of architecture in Pune could actually respond to that. And for us, it was a great learning of how do we actually uh, excite people in understanding what sustainability is all about and get them on board these principles so that they can take it forward in their own buildings and start influencing the city into getting into a more resilient, more climate friendly opportunity. And we've seen that these catalysts actually work the world over. If we look at, say, what the Eden project, which is in Cornwall in the UK, this was an old abandoned coal mine. And just as one project which demonstrated the principles of sustainability, these ideas were taken forward by visitors who came all over the world to actually view this center, and whether it's right from hardcore technology to soft bio interventions using these domes and creating new sort of landscapes, controlled landscapes. Uh, In another project that we did actually for the Maharashtra Tourism Development Corporation, we were asked to create a tourism project for them in the small village called Haddi. And we realized that building a hotel was not really the right way to go. So we decided that if we are to look at creating livelihoods, we are to look at protecting the environment, we need to look at the existing infrastructure that we have, understand that. And there were fisher folk and there were farmers in the area. So rather than build hotel projects and tourism sort of infrastructure, we decided that we would give tourism to the people itself. So we designed these floating hotels, which the fisher folk of the area could actually use and create these small hotels and rooms which actually connected together. And for the farmers of the area, we actually measured every house in the village and proposed how they could be renovated and actually new houses and new sort of units attached to it. So rather than have this 46-room hotel, we created these either fishing platforms or house renovations where they could actually run a collective or cooperative hotel together. And all the money they would have otherwise spent, on building, hotels and whatever else, we actually decided that they would spend it on infrastructure, doing up their jetties, their marketplaces, places of worship, beach facilities to take it forward. So we realized that when we look at planning, we shouldn't be looking at architectural solutions. We need to look at systems. We need to look at things innovatively. One of the big inspirations for me as a young architect was looking at how do we actually collectively design, because we generally we look at individual houses, or we either look at large housing complexes which are insensitive to real needs of users. Christopher Day is one person who is an inspiration, because Christopher Day doesn't design individual houses, nor does he do large complexes. He actually works with communities. And the whole idea is actually to build communities. So it actually brings people together and say that how do we get a collective design going, where the houses eventually turn out to be small clusters around common facilities. And so in that way, there's a cooperative way of actually going about planning. And it's really interesting, a way of, from a small sort of module, creating into a larger cluster development, and eventually possibly going up to village, town level in a way. So coming to the regional plan, which I was asked to prepare along with Charles Greer and Edgar Ribeiro, the regional plan for Goa. But I came on board in a very unconventional way. So a couple of years before that, I had actually spearheaded a movement to actually block the previous regional plan, the 2011 plan, which is a complete disaster. It was done by, or actually colored by the ministers of the area who were charging large amounts of money to convert land. And so along with a number of other architects, we did a full mapping exercise. We did a full sort of awareness campaign to people saying that this was disastrous for Goa. We calculated the amount of area that had been converted, the effect on the ecological areas of Goa, and how it would impact life in general. And so to keep me quiet when that government fell and new government came in, they decided to put me on board the regional, preparing the new regional plan. And I soon realized that actually it's far easier to stop a regional plan than to actually prepare a new one, because planning is far more complex than I really understood at that point of time. But it was a great learning exercise in how to actually go about it. And the two things that we actually considered for Goa was the speciality of Goa in terms of its ecological zones. We have fields, forests, water bodies, orchard areas, all which are eco-sensitive, which we had to protect from development. So we started mapping all the ecological sensitive areas of Goa. And we also started mapping all the growth areas of Goa, the small towns, the villages which are, say, peripheral to coastal areas, villages which are peripheral to the town areas, and how their growth patterns were turning out to be. So we really looked at how these were slowly panning out. And we decided that in order to protect Goa, we needed to demarcate the eco-sensitive zones and actually demarcate the growth areas in Goa. So these are the two base plans that we have. For the eco-sensitive zones, we mapped these into eco-sensitive 1 and eco-sensitive 2. So eco-sensitive 1 was areas which are completely no-go, the forest, the field areas, the water bodies. And eco-sensitive 2 was, say, the orchard areas or areas peripheral to settlement areas where you could allow growth over the years as the population grew or as needs grew. And for the growth areas, we marked them in different zoning as well. So VP1, VP2, VP3, where each zone had a different density, different height that you could achieve, or areas, say, peripheral to municipalities, where again, the density was slightly higher. In this way, we actually protected the rural areas, because by maintaining, say, the density areas in municipal areas and reducing the density areas in village areas, big investment from developers, say, immediately started moving towards the municipal areas where infrastructure was available. So power, water, road networks, all that was available close to municipal areas. And so we started densification in these municipal areas that could take it and start saving the village areas from excessive development. So these are the basic assets of Goa in terms of fields, forests, sea, beach, coastal areas, CRZ. And we decided that this definitely has to be protected. At that point of time, we did not have GIS mapping. We just had Google mapping over there. But we decided that we would do a participative process. So for the first time, in fact, I think only Kerala and West Bengal had briefly experimented with the whole thing of participative planning. So we decided that as part of the state level committee, we needed to actually create a base map of what existed in the state, the resources, and take it to the people and empower them to decide on what they wanted for their future. So using Google, of course, we could understand the network of things, and using the existing maps that we had, from the PWD, from the town planning department, it set it out. But we first had to make people understand of what infrastructure and development was about. So we actually created booklets which we passed around to village panchayats, did awareness campaigns at village level for them to decide and understand what planning, participative planning was. So grey infrastructure, what we called it, was really what they understand as development, which is the roads, the settlement areas, industry, power lines, whatever. So that's where grey infrastructure comes. But where do you get your water from? Where do you sequester your carbon dioxide? Where does the food come from? all this is green infrastructure, and green infrastructure, in order to support, gray infrastructure, is usually about 4 or 5 times the area of gray infrastructure. And that needed to be mapped as well. So where do we have our existing resources of green infrastructure, and how do we protect it so that it supplies us what we need as infrastructure? So every village actually started doing their mapping of what is gray and what is green, marking or as well the eco-sensitive zones, because there was a limit to how much we could map from Google. So there had to be ground reality actually put upon these things. So they started mapping this thing, and we realized soon that Goa is actually an assemblage of cells of development, where each one is actually completely independent. Each village actually has fields, forests, water bodies, settlement areas, orchard areas, cattle grazing areas, almost forming a complete and autonomous unit of development. And they realized that all these resources actually existed in each village. So what if we actually use as a modular system of development? Goa is an assemblage of about 300, 400 villages. So like a giant creature, it was these cells almost which brought Goa to life as a plan. And people got extremely excited. In fact, our own office actually helped people in the mapping exercises. So in this particular village of Para, which is just close to my own village, they started mapping animal tracks, bird nesting sites, water bodies where there were other small animals over there, butterfly zones. All these were mapped, besides, of course, the settlement areas, field areas, in fact, the different type of crops that were available in the area. And they also mapped their aspirations, so where they would like to harvest water, where they would like to afforest something. All these are mapped very excitedly, by the people. And all these individual villages were put together to eventually form the regional plan. So while we were doing this, we started looking at village boundaries and how are village boundaries really assessed in the old days. So usually it was, of course, a central sort of node of development where you had the settlement areas and fields all around. But there were a number of villages which are actually defined by watersheds, which is actually the most sensible way of defining an ecological and economic boundary for a village or a unit of development. So this is a study that we actually did along with the University of Stockholm. So I anchor a lot of programs in Goa for some of the foreign universities. I've done it for the Pratt Institute, for Stockholm, for Oxford Brookes as well. And it's a great learning for both our office and for the institutes in sharing what we have. So this is actually looking at watershed development, say, in Goa, and how do we actually look at a reconfiguring of villages such that they're ecological units of development. And how do we assess them through checkpoints of where they're located? So whether it's in the hilly area, the orchard, the plains, or the coastal areas of there. So the water networks or patterns in these areas is completely different. And how do we get these watershed communities to actually understand water as their main resource and share the thing? So each village would actually start producing different types of crops. They would have different sort of livelihoods and the thing. And so the exchange needed to take part in. But water was a central feature, and of course, the ground terrain to determining the nature of each type of village. And networking these villages together became a critical aspect of it. We looked at how do we excite the people into understanding and protecting their various zones. So whether it's the coastal areas, stabilizing their sand dunes, water harvesting, so we can actually push the salinity out of these coastal areas, because there's a lot of intrusion, especially due to climate change, a lot of erosion of beach areas. How do we actually connect the biodiversity of areas, especially field areas? So butterfly, bee pollination can take place. How do we actually look at tourism? So using concepts like we use in Southeast Asia of living on farms, harvesting, sowing, and eating the food that they actually get straight off the land which they're living on, and protecting the forest areas. So allowing a very limited exploration of these areas, so people really realize that these areas that you rarely see in your general place of living, whether it's a small village or town or cities, we look at forest areas, these blank green areas. So how do we let them explore? I work on a lot of jungle lodges across India, and it's really, besides being a place where you just go there to relax, it's an educational exercise of getting people to understand what biodiversity is and how, and the great need to actually protect this. So these are just exercises on getting people aware and protective of all their eco-sensitive zones. So when studying villages, we looked at this particular village, which is a perfect watershed. With in the green patches are the hills on the two sides, which are grazing lands, forest land. In this, it moves down the slope towards the yellow patches are settlement areas, and the center gray patch, you see the water check dam areas, is where the fields are. So we create this, respond to this perfect watershed in the way we plan, and started dividing.
Yeah, he joined.
Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Please continue.
Hello.
We can hear you, sir. You can continue.
Yeah. So I start my slideshow again.
Yeah, from the place where we got disconnected, we can start from there.
Okay. Which is the last slide you saw?
Watershed. We were talking about the watershed area and its management.
Okay. Watershed.
Previous to this, I think.
Is it
Yes,
this one, the watershed? Yeah.
Next one. No, not this previous one.
Yeah, this one.
This one you can continue from.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Yeah. So basically, creating a sort of network sort of development of villages using water as the core area. And we started actually exciting people with the idea of creating these images, which actually got them to think about their own areas of zones that they were. So whether it was a coastal area, looking at how do we protect the sand dunes, how do we harvest water, keep salinity out, look at climate change, sea level rise, because our coastlines are getting eroded at an extremely fast pace, where in about 20 years, we estimate that the beaches would not be pretty enough to actually even support tourism. So how do we actually protect this is very important to us. How do we look at agricultural areas and such that we have crossover of biodiversity, whether it's the pollination systems which are there. Sorry about that. And have these agricultural areas connect in some way. We looked at tourism. Tourism, if you look at Southeast Asia, for example, they have this concept called agro-tripping, which is actually living on farmland. So you can be participative in terms of the area of action of harvesting, sowing, eating the food of the virtual fields or orchards that you're living on. So looking at how do we integrate that experience with tourism as well, because our tourism otherwise is very beach-centric. And yet we have a tremendous amount of field areas. We also have a tremendous amount of forest areas. having worked a lot in the jungle areas, designing lodges across the country, especially in tiger sanctuaries, I realized the great need for people to be aware of the great asset we have, of the great biodiversity that we have across India, which is one of the greenest countries in the world. So, and we're losing that extremely fast. So how do we actually look at preserving that biodiversity, allowing people snippets of this great speciality of nature, and allowing them then to participate in the beauty of nature and therefore also start taking action and protecting it as well. So when we study villages and looking at watersheds, this is one particular village which is a perfect watershed, which really looks at on the two sides, the north and the south side is where we have all the forest areas which are on the slopes and on the hilltops. It moves down to the yellow areas, which are settlement areas. And right in the center, where we see the little blue patches, are the watersheds that we've developed for the village. So it's a very agrocentric sort of village, but there are a lot of peripheral developments that you could have to it in terms of, value-adding agricultural products, small industries that spin off agro activities. And since I mentioned that, Goa has these 300-400 villages, and it's been an agrarian society for a long time, but we're losing extremely fast. In fact, our water runoff to the sea is so high that we have villages which are completely independent of water are now, buying water and getting piped water from dams across the state, which is really sad because we're losing our ability to actually and losing our traditional systems of water harvesting extremely quickly. So basically, we work a lot on trying to create awareness among people and communities in keeping water centric to it. So how do we look at new systems that could be developed in it? So aquaponics, permaculture, and how do we get these concepts going to preserve village activities there. I had the opportunity to visit this town on the peripheral of Stockholm. It's an interesting development, which is a new town, but it's a brownfield project. It's actually built on an old industrial area, which is sort of configured to take this new settlement area. And they decided to put the basic principles of sustainability into action. So it's this very low-rise town which has all the basic principles integrated into it of how, say, getting off the grid, solar energy, water harvesting, recycling all their garbage. Their food comes from a little community food area. So basically, we have food patches. Every house has got a little food patch of its own, so they can grow their own fruits, vegetables that they want. And there are also larger community gardens that they can get their food from. And they have also food markets, and so everything is connected with sustainability in the way. And there are all these central large spaces. It's more or less a walking city. There is public transport that connects to it, and there are limited carways through the city as well. But everything is a closed loop system. So it's all about energy waste and how do we actually create this thing. So if you look at energy waste and water as closed loop systems, and how do we actually bring that out into developing a city? I also had the opportunity of meeting this architect planner called Soon. And Soon had this very utopian idea for Singapore. Singapore, as you know, is one of these, is a city country almost, and extremely dense. And they really do not have very much in terms of agricultural land. So Soon's model was to actually create a Singapore, which was about 16 very dense sort of settlement areas. And he decided that the mechanized economy, which is basically industry and commerce and everything, is put bang in the center. And one would normally think this is a complete disaster of having, industry in the center of the city, because industry is normally polluting and high in its impact on the environment. But his logic was that by putting industry in the center, it would automatically have much more controls in it to make sure that it runs efficiently, the use of energy is efficient. And by having it in the center, also make sure that all this thing that's peripheral to it, so whether it's retail or commerce that comes out from it, is also very efficient as well. So it's at the center, your transport systems come bang to the center, and peripheral to that would be your other infrastructure of, your schools, your hospitals, and other community sort of infrastructure. and peripheral to that, eventually the settlement areas. And this would eventually move on to the fields beyond that. So you have these very dense, interconnected 1 square kilometer by 1 square kilometer sort of dense settlement areas, and they're connected by high-speed transport from the core, one core to the other core. So this would leave large tracts of open land, which eventually fed the community. And it also allowed for a walking city, because you would never need to walk more than 500 meters from the center of the city to the end corner periphery of the city, which made it an extremely walkable, car-free city as well. So maybe a little utopian, but it was an interesting idea that we have. And looking back at his idea, we already have that in practice, and that is the village, what we call. So the village is this little dense core of settlement and small infrastructure, and around it are fields. So we have a model actually in India that can be actually replicated in some way, where we densify core areas and allow large tracts of agricultural lands or lands which are meant for other livelihoods to come into place. A big influence in looking at participative planning has been in Curitiba, where Jamie Lerner, who's an architect, planner, and also the mayor of Curitiba, did some amazing sort of interventions. He, in fact, visited Goa about 8 years ago and had a chance of meeting up with him. And a very inspirational person. And he did it by incentivizing. In fact, in his office in Curitiba, he has a big carrot hanging above his desk. He says, you can't use a stick to tell people what to do. You have to incentivize and give them a carrot about it. And he also has a statue of a little boy peeping into his room. And it says, when we look at making decisions, we should always think of what the future generation wants. And they're looking at us now and looking at our decisions, because that's going to change their lives. And that's really an interesting way for a designer or a planner to look at it. We generally look and respond to what, say, systems tell us, but we need to look at what future citizens need and be responsible for their livelihoods in the future. So he looked at pedestrianization of the city, he looked at great transport systems, he looked at these interconnected just north-south or east-west transport systems which had changeover sort of tubes. He looked at how do you look at garbage, how do you look at agricultural produce within the city itself, and incentivize people from taking care of garbage themselves, of growing their own food themselves. So it's all about this incentivizing and getting people on board to actually make decisions of their own. He looked at the river that ran through the city. So he looked at the river that ran through the city and the areas which are meant for, say, flood plains of the river, actually became agricultural producing areas or recreational areas in the city, and he started protecting those areas. And he just kept on getting elected year after year, term after term, because of these great changes. When we look at the future, we look at images like this, and this is Corbusier's image of the future, and we thought, oh gosh, this is far too utopian, and it can never happen like this thing. But it has, and that's Dubai today, where we see this city, which is all these tall, sort of inhuman sort of scale of things, only cars moving around, you can hardly see people. And it's all about this completely mechanized economy, almost sort of destroying the city in a way and converting us into a robotic sort of civilization. And so there have been many utopian ideas of creating a city which is so dense that the city is actually into multi-story buildings where everything is all the residential areas, and then you have industry which is put in one front, and you have other agro-producing and field lands all around. But this is also inhuman as well. It may be extremely inefficient, but it's completely inhuman. So there's this balance that we have to look at, and we have examples of that. I mean, Oroville, for example, has been that attempt at creating this sort of galaxy, as they call it, where you have the core. But here the core is, of course, spiritual with the Matra Mandir, and it slowly moves out into the rural areas of it, and spines of development that moves out from it, of commercial areas, residential areas. So there are interesting models happening all over. With climate change, people are looking at floating cities around the world. They're looking at green towers where all your food is grown in. So all very great attempts at what the future could be like, but a utopian at the same time. But there are movements which are also very reasonable, very straightforward. Especially in the pandemic, we realized that getting good food, uh, which is free of pesticides, free of fertilizers, has been difficult. And concepts of edible cities have been springing up now around the world. New York City has a movement called Gotham Greens, where they've taken the terraces of buildings and actually started growing green. So all the exclusive restaurants actually buy their vegetables from within New York City itself, and they pay a premium for that because it's locally grown. We have concepts of slow cities, which came in from the slow food movement, where basically slow food is all about being human again. It's all about people sitting together around the table. It was as a sort of counter to the fast food movement of McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, where people were just eating in a hurry. It was very bad food, and the idea of slow cities is not only good food, which is healthy, but also creating conversation where people can actually sit for a long time. And by creating conversation, you're actually able to bring about social change, because the moment people communicate, they're able to actually start making decisions and at times even politically influencing their own futures. So slow cities, the basic concept of slow cities, of course, are pedestrianization, of densification in certain areas and spreading out in other areas in a way which creates efficiency, at the same time creates human scale as well. And of course, looking at energy, water, and all their recycling. A more recent concept, and I'm quite sure a number of you must have heard about, is really a donut economy. So when we're looking at cities, how do we look at two main aspects? One is, of course, the ecological protection that we have for our lives, and also the social sort of incentives that we need to put into society. So how do we look at support systems, education, healthcare? How do we look at protecting the environment around us, especially with climate change? It's an extremely important factor. So this is a sort of more advanced version of the circular economy, where it has a lot more depth to it. And there are checkpoints of what is needed in terms of social well-being in a city, and what is needed in terms of ecological well-being in the city. Because most of our cities actually depend on their water, their power, or their food from areas which are times 50, 100 kilometers away. But can we actually achieve a city where all our water, food, everything can actually come from a very short distance away, thus making it far more efficient, far more ecologically sound? And how can we actually have our social systems which are walking away? A lot of German cities have rules like, school should be not, or kindergarten should be more than 5 minutes away, a main school 10 minutes away, shopping not more than 15 minutes walk away, major shopping. And so it's all these guidelines of pedestrianization, of creating a more human city, which are slowly coming into being. And we definitely need to respond to that. Habib and myself were on a webinar a few days ago where Rahul Malhotra spoke, and Rahul Malhotra shared his own interests in planning. And of course, we also talked about what's happening in India. We talked about, say, the Central Vista project. We talked about the farmers' protest. And we can see the change that is taking place in planning in India, and how do we address it? And I'm not trying to make a political statement over here, but I'm seeing it. How do we actually bring people on board a planning process? How do we make it far more participative, so the aspirations can be, understood by the political class and taken forward? Because eventually the political class just wants to be voted in again. But at times they make decisions in planning which are really against people's interests. So how do they understand what people's interests really are and really take that forward in a way? So when we talked about, of course, the circular economy and the donut economy, it can be regenerative in terms of, closed loop systems. And how do we actually connect them? Like I talked earlier about, the network villages. Trying to understand the world around us in this very simple format. This is taken from a book of The Atlas of Sustainability, Designer's Atlas of Sustainability by Ann Thorpe. It's actually a thesis project. And she tried to understand what sustainability is all about and where we've gone wrong. And if you look at the world, of course, we've got the atmosphere, we've got the biosphere, we've got the hydrosphere, and you've got to the core of it, the lithosphere. And we've lived very happily in the biosphere and the hydrosphere, for centuries. Mankind has lived that way. But in the last 200 years, we've actually gone into what is called the lithosphere. So we've extracted coal, we've extracted metal, we've extracted a lot of other elements which are extremely polluting. And those have actually come into the biosphere. Now, for centuries, nature has been able to actually handle the biosphere. There's a natural way of recycling materials. We've been able to use building materials in the biosphere, whether it's wood, bamboo, surface rocks. But lithosphere, of course, has given us a lot of new technologies and metals, but they all deteriorate with time and they all tend to pollute. So how do we look at a nice balance between the biosphere and the lithosphere? Try to minimize the amount of lithosphere materials that are needed and increase the amount of biosphere materials that are needed. So these are things that we need to understand, that we're living on a living planet, and we have to respect its ways. And we're seeing the ill effects of pollution, of garbage that's taken, and climate change that's affecting us tremendously. So we need to understand the history of the earth and how to respect and respond to that in a way. And there are a lot of organizations that are working with this thing. This is a clip from John Thompson Partners. I had again an opportunity to attend a workshop of them. And John Thompson Partners works across the world actually in creating participative planning methods in various cities where they get people together and, right from the sweeper in the street to the mayor of a town, and make them understand their city and what their city's problems are and what their city could be in the future. I'm part of an organization called Act for Goa, which is it's a number of people in various different fields. And they're architects, designers, planners, economists, sociologists, anthropologists, social changers, who are actually looking at putting aspirations of the people together on a web platform where they can actually say there's an issue in this particular village. We need, better street lights. There's a garbage issue. There's a transport issue. And all this is mapped and eventually given to the government and say, these are problems that people want, or these are the aspirations that people want. And the government is then able to have a database of which they can take forward. So it also brings about political change, because now here's how they can actually serve the people. This is what people really want. Instead of building, say, fancy bridges or dream circles or roundabouts, the people actually want a much more simpler and cost-effective intervention. And here's where the people can actually provide for that almost on a daily basis. So ActForGo has a Pin It app, which is basically, you can actually map the thing in real time on a map and tell what the problem is. And so whether it's even a violation of a field filling or hill cutting, all that can be mapped and action can be taken immediately by the government. I'm also part of an organization called COCOM, which is COCOM is really design in the public domain. And we've recently held a festival, a social design festival, because we believe that there are design problems and there are social problems. And designers can actually be of great assistance in actually solving social problems. So we put a whole lot of topics on board, whether it's education, garbage, water, biodiversity, climate change. And we had this conference where we invited people from around the country to actually participate and talk about these issues and bring about the solutions from it. So it's the start of a dialogue. The impact, of course, in a 5-day conference is not that much, but it's a catalyst for change. And it's important that we as designers, planners, architects actually start being that catalyst for change. But the only way you can be a catalyst for change is by actually doing it yourself. So we decided to form a community about 12 years ago. We started buying plots, and we also got friends who are designers and planners and architects to actually buy a piece of land around the colony that we now call Design Valley. So we have our central building, which is the design center, where all our events are held. On one side, we have the architectural office, and on the other side, we have the product design office. And the center is our main office, which is our awareness hub. So we reach out to people. And the only way we say that we have to look at things ecologically is actually do it ourselves. So we're completely off the grid. We generate our own solar power. We grow our food. We have this attractive land that we have on the side where we do permaculture, harvest our water, recycle our garbage. Those are two of our buildings over there and the inside of our buildings. And it's not just about the architect, it's about people. So we have a whole lot of workshops, seminars, talks, where people can come present their work and share with the community. Because the only way to actually bring about change, the only way to change the world and plan for the future is really getting people involved. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of School of Planning and Architecture and the RLCP committee, I thank you, sir, for your motivating speech and all the case studies. And as very rightly and relevantly said, bringing people and nature in the center of planning, which will be deliberated over the next 3 days through many of the papers which will get presented. I request you to kindly be with us for a few moments more. We would like to felicitate you for your support, for your speech, as well as your presence. I request Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain to kindly felicitate Dean Gabriel Licruz, sir, with a small token of honor, and I request the convener to kindly accept it on his behalf. We will be sending this to you through a courier, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much and wish you all the best. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we now come to an exciting part of the inauguration and probably one of the interesting and satisfying part for all the authors, and that is about our conference proceedings. As you all have heard, there have been several rounds of scrutiny and selection by over 20 experts from across the globe and external to SPA Vijayawada, who have selected finally 96 papers which will be presented over the next 4 days. Now, these 96 papers have been assimilated into a book with an ISBN number called the Conference Proceedings of RLCP, which runs into 496 pages and spans over 6 themes. And these papers will be presented over the next 4 days in parallel sessions. I would say a big congratulations to all the authors and the technical committee and all the organization committee and the executive members of RLCP for making the proceedings a possibility. I now, at the end of this journey of preparing this RLCP proceedings, I now request our director of SPA Vijayawada, the convener, and the other dignitaries on the dais to kindly release this proceedings. Thank you very much. I would now invite Professor Dr. Abdul Razak Muhammad, Head of the Department of Planning and Secretary of the Organizing Committee, to kindly deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I extend my warm welcome and good morning to all. Today, a group of more than 400 to 500, including the urban planning experts, practitioners, teachers, researchers, and students, convene online for the international conference, Resilience and Living City Planning, Transforming Urban Systems, organized by the Department of Planning, School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, I'm happy to say that the conference is co-sponsored by the Association of Municipalities and Development Authority, AMDA, New Delhi. We thank the AMDA Director, Mr. Selvadurai, also the former Chief Urban Planner, CMDA Chennai, for the financial support. There are institutions of national and international importance, such as SPA Delhi, Department of Architecture, NIT Hamirpur, Department of Architecture and Planning, IIT Roorkee, the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning, Melbourne School of Design, the University of Melbourne, Australia, the Department of Geography, Town Planning and Development, University of Lille, France, Polytechnic Tours, the University of Tours, France, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway, along with Emerald Publishers and Springer Publishers, is greatly acknowledged and extended our thanks for their support as a role as technical collaboration and knowledge support for RLCP 2020. I would like to highlight the theme in terms of today's conference, how cities can prepare for the recovery from disaster is today's concern for many, including the people living in cities. Good governance is a precondition for livability. Good governance is the key to creating livable, competitive, sustainable, happy, and great cities. For that, multi-stakeholders and multi-facet planning becomes the key to resilient and livable cities. A resilient and livable city should be green infrastructure. That's what you can all heard from the chief guest today's speech. The key to resilient and livable cities, a resilient and livable city should have green infrastructure and public realm to allow the residents to live safe, protect nature, business to flourish, culture to cherish, and visitors to enjoy. A roadmap to a green and resilient future, there is 3 essential principles planners to keep in mind, which are all interdependent: sustainability, mobility, and livability. Sustainability takes natural resources and new technology into account. Livability is building cities with a high quality of life. Overall, sustainability and mobility contribute greatly to urban livability as a whole. It reflects the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, stressing on building sustainable cities and communities. A beautiful city, from skyline to landscape, includes the physical form of the city, natural and man-made landmarks, public transportation, and a balance between historical and new developments. A beautiful city should be rich in its individual identity, culture, environment, history. All these create civic pride. As the United Nations has reported, more than 50% of global population now live in urban areas. Livability is these growing cities can be elusive, particularly in Asia. They are unique, vulnerable to impacts of cultural climate change and natural disaster, making resiliency a top priority. This conference dialogue on resilient and livable city planning is particularly relevant to India and the globe. Make all attempts to recover from the disastrous COVID-19 is of the topic at national and international debate about how to plan cities for better living is the challenge. The conference RLCP 2020 featuring inaugural function, keynote presentations, technical sessions will provide participants with an opportunity to exchange research output, best practices, and lesson learned. It is our pride moment to say that there are 96 papers with around 237 authors. 5 key speakers, keynote speakers, play a major role in the conference. It is worth mentioning here, thanks to all of them. Chief Burton convener, along with 3 secretaries, 5 joint secretaries, and 14 executive members engaged in the plan and execution of this conference. Also, there are 35 members in the technical committee and 20 members international committee, which accounts 75 experts across India and abroad, whose intellectual contribution towards the quality control of the abstracts and full papers required a special mention with thanks and gratitude to all. Further, there are 15 technical session chairs and 15 co-chairs will be joining us and look forward to streamline the discussion and closely monitoring the time of the presenters throughout this conference will be of the main actors in the intellectual journey of the 3 days ahead. All this intellectual team, around 350 members, needs acknowledge their little or big efforts. They deserve a hearty thanks. To collide all these efforts into one platform initiated by Dr. Adinarayan, our convener of the RLCP and Dean Planning and Development, for his constant effort and make the conference possible online, made into a path of success. I wish to include 2 more members here, Dr. Ayan Tarapkar, Associate Professor, Department of Planning, and Dr. Fayaz Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Department of Architecture, and Associate Dean Research, done excellent work for the last 4 to 5 months to take the responsibility to design, editing, and corresponding with this, all the stakeholders for the success of this RLCP 2020. Thanks to all these 3 champions, I call it the champions of the RLCP 2020. More than an architect and a professor, an institutional builder, Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Director SPA and the patron, the RLCP 2020, for her devotion and commitment to build the SPA campus not only in its physical form, but more into a successive educational institution of international importance. I would like to appreciate the thanks to Madam for giving all support wholeheartedly to make the conference to rise high. Thank you. I have immense pleasure to extend our heartfelt thanks to our RLCP 2020 Guest of Honor Architecture Con, Habib Ahmed, the President, the Council of Architecture, the Government of India, who is managing the architectural profession at the country and making all efforts moving forward to have positive growth and development of the architecture profession. I thank our chief guest, architect Dean D. Cruz, a renowned architect professional who hailed from the city of Goa, for accepting our invitation with a short notice and for his chief guest address with thought-provoking ideas on the theme RLCP 2020. It's our duty to extend our gratitude and thanks to Architect Brinda Somia, the Chief Patron RLCP 2020, the chairperson, BOG, School of Planning and Architecture for her support and help towards conduct of this RLCP 2020 and the growth and development of this institution. Conference always accommodates keynote speech to make it complete. So in this regard, I would like to thank the following 5 senior professors of international repute. Dr. Pius, Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning, University of Melbourne, Australia. Dr. Marcus, Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Norway. Dr. Lewis, University of West England, Bristol, UK. Dr. Pearson Rao, Director, SPA Delhi, and Dr. Eric, University of Lille, France. Thanks also extended to the chief guest, Dr. Ramok Kumar Gupta, Chairperson, BOG, School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, will be giving valedictory address on 13/2/21. It is important to extend our thanks to Administrative Head, Dr. Umashankar Rao, the Registrar and his team for their help and support. The technical section, venue coordinators conduct the technical section and IT team. Thanks to keynote speakers, technical session chairs, co-chairs, paper presenters, and students. Also, thanks to the committee chairs and members belongs to 10 various tasks to perform as the preparatory work for this conference. Towards knowledge dissemination, the media play an important role. In this regard, we extend our thanks to the press and also thanks to the learners in this conference, is our students, SPA, for their presence. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdul Razak. We have now come towards the end of the inaugural session. Before we end, I would like to brief you about what is going to happen post-inaugural session. We have 96 papers which are spread over 6 teams which will run parallel. At any point of time, you will see there are 3 parallel sessions running. I would just like to name the themes: livable cities, ecology and society, and urban energy resilience. These 3 themes will run parallel today, post-lunch, and tomorrow. And all the papers will be completed by tomorrow for these 3 themes. Planning studies, city planning and design, and sustainable urban systems. These 3 themes will start from tomorrow post-lunch and will conclude on the 4th day. And also, as mentioned by Professor Razak, there are 5 keynote sessions, keynote addresses. 2 will happen after a short break right now, before lunch, where 2 eminent professors from 2 different corners of the world, one from far east towards the southern hemisphere, Australia, and one from far north, Norway, are waiting for us. So with these few words, I would now request all of you to kindly rise so that we can honor our national anthem before we begin. we will take a 10 minutes break, and then all the attendees, online attendees, can rejoin in the same link to listen to the two keynotes. Thank you.